Hello again, and welcome to our second session of Project 11.5, where you're doing your personal projects. I hope that you've all had a bit of time to explore the internet and to start thinking about your topics and how you're going to move forward. Now, in today's session, we're going to be looking at two things. We're going to be looking at how to choose a topic, and then most importantly, how to focus your research question. So I'll be telling you about what a research question is and why it's so important in any research project, whether it be this personal project you're doing, whether it's an EPQ, or whether it's a dissertation research later when you're at university. So we're going to be looking at brainstorming some ideas. Then we're going to be looking at focusing these ideas. Then we're going to judge some project titles from students. And then I'm going to conclude by looking at where to go next in terms of your project, how to move forward to week 2. Now, where to start? Well, the first thing is, of course, choosing a topic. Kind of questions you have to ask yourself is, do you have a genuine interest in the topic? Is it related to your future plans? Does your topic have a clear aim? This is absolutely key. It needs to be focused on a clear aim and a very clear objective that you want to achieve. Otherwise, writing the conclusion at the end or presenting the conclusion in our case will be very difficult, okay? And in the spirit of project learning, you shouldn't be covering the project topic in your lessons. The idea of it is that this leads us up to the extended project qualification, the EPQ, and the idea of it being extended means that it should be above and beyond your normal lesson content, so that within the spirit of EPQ is the idea of inquiry and exploration. So it could be something that you've studied a little bit before, but you're going to extend a lot more. And of course, have you taught your teacher about these ideas? In this case, you're going to have a supervisor guiding you through this process, and they are a very important person in terms of project learning. So where to start in terms of exploring potential topics? The questions you need to ask yourself are, what is already known about the topic? Is there something I know a little bit about, but I know that it's going to be very interesting to me? Is it something that I know a reasonable amount about and I really want to extend my knowledge? This is a very important one. Is there sufficient literature to work with? Now, within the field of research, when we speak of literature, we're not talking about English literature like Shakespeare and poetry. We're talking about, is there research material, essays, topics, books, videos, documentaries, news articles, etc. So we're using this term literature in a much broader sense of the word. What are the current issues surrounding the topic? Now, with all project-based learning, it's always interesting to choose something which has some kind of currency that you might want to talk about at the moment. We probably won't want to talk too much about COVID-19, but we could talk about other things. A lot of students at the moment are interested in writing about Brexit. I'm going to be talking a little bit about space tourism today because that's a very topical issue. So having this idea of things being current, it doesn't have to be the case, but it does add interest if it has relevance to the world around us now. How will you go about researching the topic, and can you realistically research it? This is really important. And another question you might ask yourself is it feasible? Can I actually do it in a 15-minute or 10-minute presentation within 5 weeks? Am I going to be able to achieve my aims? Is there enough material on it? Is it achievable? Is it doable? That is the most important thing when you're thinking about what your title is going to be. Now, the types of research, types of resources available to you are numerous. And in the project-based learning, we generally like to have a mix of primary and secondary resources. I think in our shortened Project 11.5, we're probably going to be looking more at secondary resources. But it might be the case that you could use some primary resources, okay? So examples of primary resources are things like original documents, That's diaries, speeches, manuscripts, official records, news, footage, autobiographies, etc., etc. In terms of creative works, you might be looking at, say, poetry, drama, novels, music, or art. In terms of relics or artifacts, if you were doing a longer project, you might look at even things like pottery, furniture, clothing, and buildings. I've had one or two students in the past who've even done ones that involve artifacts, found artifacts in the form of archaeology. But I think within our shortened period of time, as I say, it's more realistic that you're going to be using things like secondary resources. And these would include things like textbooks, magazines, histories, commentaries, encyclopedias. And I'm going to do a whole session on how to use Google Scholar, because the internet is a fantastic resource for us. And in many cases, there is a wealth of material on all kinds of subjects. So, in terms of exploring the topics and finding literature, and I remind you that literature is used in the research as a research term here, first, you need to clarify any unknown information and definitions. This is really important. So in your title, if you're talking about, say, space tourism, which I'm going to talk about in a slide that follows, you need a clear definition. You need to use dictionaries for that, okay? Identify the main concepts or elements of your topic. So these are key words and phrases. Now you use related words, and you usually try to make your topic as focused as possible. I'm going to be going into that in a moment. So it's very important that you think about what are the concepts and what are the keywords associated with your topic. Here is the example: the impact of computers and the internet on higher education learning. And the concepts that we'll be looking at are computers, internet, learning, and higher education. The key words would be computers, information technology, the internet, the World Wide Web, learning, acquiring knowledge, higher education, HE, university, college. Okay, so we're breaking down our topic and we're thinking about how we can focus it. So generally speaking, when you want to start finding a topic, you begin with a general idea, and that is the general field of things that you are particularly interested in. In our shortened idea of the project, you would have a few days to read into this general topic and begin to think about your first research question. After a day or two further, you can focus your research and come out with a more focused research question. Generally speaking, the more focused the question is, the easier it is to actually achieve your objective. If you set yourself a question which is unfocused, you will find yourself going off topic all of the time or having to cover too many different areas. So the idea is to narrow your topic down, and that makes your conclusion a lot more feasible and achievable to write. Okay, so how does this work? Well, as I said, I'm going to take this particular topic of space tourism. Here we have it now. I find it very interesting. And I think to myself, well, I'm going to use a kind of mind mapping strategy at first to decide what are all the different aspects of space tourism and how might I focus my research question a little bit, okay? So my main topic, as you can see here, is space tourism. And then I draw some branches off it, and I think, well, of primary interest would be things like the logistics and the technology. And of course, I could have many more branches to this diagram, but this is just for simplicity's sake. Under logistics, I decide I'll be looking at things like cost, the environmental aspect, and impacts of having these extremely unenvironmental giant engines burning up all this rocket fuel, etc. And then in terms of the technology, I'm thinking about the question, is it going to produce a new space race like we had between Russia and the United States previously? Because we already have a space race now with China joining in. So will this space tourism generate a new kind of space race? That might be one of the questions. And so in my diagram, I would probably have a lot more branches than this. And I would use it to explore the topic and to start to hone in on what it is that I'm really interested in. Now, frequently your teachers will tell you that Wikipedia is a bad thing, and we do always have to be careful with Wikipedia, but it is also a fantastic place to begin any project. And I use this a lot with students on the EPQ when you begin in year 12. Not always because the information in Wikipedia is faultless, because it isn't. But one of the most important and valuable things is to go to the bottom of the Wikipedia page and you will find excellent references. And as you can see here, they're blue and hyperlinked. So if I was investigating the topic of space tourism and I wanted to become a real expert and read some genuinely good articles on it, I could have a look at the references and judge whether they are worth pursuing or not. If we look at this one, for instance, Boeing Space Taxi has tourist seat. It's from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and it's also from Thomson Reuters, which is a very reputable news organization. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation is owned by the government. So generally speaking, that would be a very legitimate source to have a look at. So if I'm looking and I want to improve my knowledge of space tourism, and I want to read some genuinely good, authoritative accounts, looking at Wikipedia can be an excellent place to start, but I must emphasize to start. So here we have space tourism. It's a human space travel for recreational purposes. There are several different types of space tourism, including orbital, suborbital, orbital, and lunar space tourism. So already I can start to think about potential ways that I can narrow down my definition of space tourism by looking at the definitions from Wikipedia, by maybe making sure and cross-referencing that with a very good dictionary as well. So going back to this idea of refining your question, making it narrower and more focused, let's look at the stages. I said before that we had our general topic, we then came out with a research question, and then we focused that research question. Well, let's have a look at what this example now. So my topic is space tourism, as you can see, and my first question that I set myself is space tourism feasible? But as we saw before, that's still very general and very hard to cover in quite a short essay or a presentation. So when I started to research this, I began to find out there are many different space tourism vehicles that all seem to be owned by billionaires. And I came out with a really interesting piece of research, was looking into the Virgin Galactic, which is one of the spacecraft. It's owned by Richard Branson, and it seems to be one in which he's put a lot of his passion. It has an excellent website if you want to have a look at it. And I'm going to show you a short video of it because I think it was very inspiring and interesting.
3, 2, 1, release.
It's like a catapult shot off an aircraft carrier, except it doesn't quit in a second and a half. It can go 3 times the speed of sound. We do it going straight up and accelerating the whole time until the rocket motor cuts off.
Amazing view.
And then you're just going to be instantly weightless, tranquil, floating in space, looking down at the Earth.
That is the promise of space tourism, and the race to make it a reality is well underway.
I've always wanted to be an astronaut, and I got frustrated the fact that I couldn't go up on a NASA spaceship or a Russian spaceship, so decided to build a space line.
That's when Virgin Galactic was born.
It's no secret that you're one of several companies and billionaires looking to put regular people in space. Is Virgin Galactic going to be the first to pull it off?
I'm pretty confident that before Christmas, Virgin Galactic will be the first to have people in the form of astronauts in space. I mean, astronauts are incredibly brave people, and obviously the first few flights are the dangerous ones.
Mark Stuckey is one of those astronauts and serves as Galactic's lead test pilot.
So when you get behind the wheel of the vehicle, how risky do you feel it is?
I take it very seriously, but I don't feel like I'm flipping a coin on whether I'm going to live or not.
That's because engineers here at Galactic Spaceport in Mojave, California have spent countless hours testing and improving this passenger vehicle, Spaceship Two. It's flown into the sky under the wing of this carrier aircraft, then detaches and blasts off into space for several minutes of weightlessness. Galactic's first few hundred customers have already paid around $250,000 to reserve a seat.
Who are the future customers?
Yeah.
Because it is a pretty high price point.
I actually think that the price will probably go up at the start, just because this is an expensive program. But then over time, long term, you'll see that price go down. And I think a really interesting analogy is, the early days of commercial aviation. The first flights over the Atlantic actually cost, like in real current year dollars, over $100,000. And now today I can buy a ticket on Virgin Atlantic for about $500.
In recent years, Galactic and other private companies have emerged as leaders in manned spaceflight, as government agencies like NASA have shifted focus to deeper space exploration.
So from that video, you can see that this idea of space tourism is really catching on. And Virgin Galactic is one of the most interesting of these space vehicles. Now, I don't pretend to be a great expert in the field of, space tourism, but I noticed straight away that this would be a way of focusing my topic more. So the question that I came up with is, how likely is it that Virgin Galactic is to succeed in the field of space tourism? Now, you'll notice that this question is far more focused from my original idea of space tourism. I focused in on one particular aspect of space tourism, which is this particular vehicle and this company of Virgin Galactic. And I'm setting myself a question of how likely. And one of the key elements is in any EPQ or project question, like our 11.5 personal project, we need to set a question that leads to a sense of debate. There has to be more than one view about our topic. So you need to place debate at the center of your project, as I've done here in my particular one. A good report or a presentation is not merely descriptive. Now, what do I mean by the word descriptive? Well, descriptive, when you describe something, you're giving lots and lots of information about it. And the problem with any essay or any piece of research like that is you can literally cut paste it off the internet, or you could reproduce the information which is already out there. So it's not a very interesting idea for a project, and it doesn't show higher level skills. So in any good essay or report, you need argument and evaluation to be at the heart of your question. In my graphic here, I've tried to show that you should always choose a title in which there's some kind of disagreement. And this will mean that you avoid just giving lots and lots of information in your title. Now, Bloom's taxonomy is something that educators and teachers use a great deal, and I think it's very important for students to know a little bit about it as well. Why do you have to know about it when you're only a student? Well, it's good to understand how you're going to be assessed in life. And Bloom's taxonomy basically is a pyramid, as you can see here, that shows skills in order of rank, of their value. And it begins with remembering things. So that's just giving facts and concepts. The second stage is the understanding stage. And this is where, if you choose the wrong EPQ title, where you choose a kind of describe title, you will be just showing understanding, explaining. Now, the middle ranking skill there is the application, the apply idea, which is useful in the EPQ. Analyze, evaluate, and create, though, are at the top of the pyramid. So whenever you set yourself a project title or a piece of coursework title, this really applies to all academic work. You want to make sure that the title allows you to access these higher skills: analysis, evaluation, and ideally some element of creation, showing your own ideas. So I'm going to have a quick look at a potential project title now, and I want you to start thinking about evaluating the work of other students. In the worksheet which accompanies the screencast, I've given you some titles to evaluate and to put information into a table so you can think about whether this title is going to be successful or not. And I'm just going to go through one particular example. So let's imagine that you are the project coordinator and a student has come to you and they've said, I want to set myself the research question, how do rockets work? I'm going to stop this for one moment now so that you can think about this. So what I would like you to do now is to pause the screencast and to think really carefully about the advice that you would give the student. Does this title have debate at its center? Will it lead to some of the higher skills in Bloom's taxonomy? Will it be an interesting project? Have a think about that. Okay, so you've had some time to think really about this particular title, and this is the advice that I would give, and see whether it tallies with your own, okay? So the project title, How Do Rockets Work? The aim of it is clear. We know what the researcher wants to do. He's going to give us a lot of description. However, the problem with this when it comes to things like depth, well, you could go into a lot of detail about how the rockets work. You could put a lot of maths and physics in there. You could do all kinds of things like this. But the problem with the development is this project would tend to be descriptive, and it would not involve much development of argument. And that is because it is a how question, which means it orientates this particular researcher or student to give lots and lots of detail. It would be better to compare or investigate two proposals for new rocket technology. This would lead to analysis and evaluation, which is the best thing for our purpose. Or an alternative thing would be when I showed you my particular idea of space tourism, where you could focus on one particular rocket, but make sure that people disagreed about how effective or practical it was. So I want you now to do the following exercise, and you'll see that there's a worksheet for you. I've got down a number of titles here. I'm not going to go through all of them now because you can do this in your own time. And what I'd like you to do is to spend about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes even thinking about each of these and deciding whether these would be good project titles or not. And in doing this, this will help you get a very clear idea of what a good title will be for yourself. So if you could do that now, please. Now, I hope you've had time to analyze those titles and to think very carefully about them. You will notice alongside this worksheet, there is another sheet in which I've given my own feedback on these titles and a number of other titles too. So we're not going to go through this in this screencast, but look at this worksheet really carefully, as it will give you real insight into the process of refining and focusing your own title. Now, what next? So your EPQ is going to involve a lot of the following: brainstorming ideas, some preliminary research, focusing title in light of this research, maybe further preliminary research, refocusing your title, choosing where to look. Are you going to use primary or secondary sources? As I said before, it's more likely that you are going to use more secondary sources. We're going to be doing a whole screencast on how to search, but in the meantime, you can begin to move on to Google and perhaps to look at Google Scholar. You're going to be looking at critically evaluating your reading and your sources. As you saw when I talked about Wikipedia before, we can't simply take things off the internet. We need to analyze them and decide whether they are good sources of information or not, okay? We are going to be doing stuff on referencing to make sure that you don't plagiarize. That means copying people's idea. And then we're going to start to think about writing this up and planning your final presentation. So, in conclusion now, a quick overview of what we've covered. You're going to be looking at your topic, and it's going to lead to some kind of research question, and the idea will be that you focus this research question. You're going to be using mind mapping. I think that that's a very, very valuable tool, and it helps you focus your ideas and narrow them down. You're going to be avoiding descriptive questions, and you're going to be remembering Bloom's taxonomy, and hopefully remembering that analysis, evaluation, and creativity are the top skills in any academic work. It's very important that you realize that closed questions are fatal. Closed questions are when there are only one answer. How do rockets work, for instance, seems to me to be a closed question. And don't forget that your supervisor is there to help you all of the time. Discuss the process of coming to your research question with them. This is the most important idea of project learning. Getting the research question or the driving question is so valuable. Good luck in doing this. I hope that you're enjoying the project, and I will be back again next week to look at further research techniques. Thank you.